lovely evening to all of you, my dear friends. I'm ever so thankful once again that you all could join me. We left off in our last Bible study on the life of Christ, our part 40 study with Jesus. He observes this poor woman in the temple, which is very important to note that he was in the temple at the end of our last study. She puts in 2 little mites, like 2 pennies, into the treasury, and he honors her by using her as an example for the disciples to give with your heart. And that is where we come to right now, still on the Tuesday of the Holy Week. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another, and that shall not be thrown down. And many may wonder why the disciples, these Jews, would be so looking at the temple and everything and the buildings surrounding it with so much wonder. Well, these are Galilean Jews. Not everyone was observing the temple on a daily basis. And the disciples intended, according to Benson, the disciples intended to intimate probably what a pitiable calamity they thought it, that such a grand structure as the temple should be destroyed. Indeed, as the whole temple was built with the greatest cost and magnificence, so nothing was more stupendous than the uncommon measure of the stones, some of which, particularly those employed in the foundations, were in magnitude 40 cubits. Jesus has already told them about the destruction and how there'd be no stone left upon another. He tells them this multiple times, which is another good lesson for preachers, and teachers. Repetitiveness is a good thing. Anyway, these marvelous things that they're thinking, man, this is awful. This is all going to be destroyed. And some of the stones were of the whitest marble, 45 cubits long, 5 cubits high, and 6 broad. Indeed, the marble of the temple was so white that, according to Josephus, it appeared at a distance like a mountain of snow, while the gilding of several of its external parts, especially when the sun shone upon it, rendered it a most splendid and beautiful spectacle. It is said that at the fall of Jerusalem, the last surviving Jews of the city fled to the temple because it was the strongest and most secure building in the city. Roman soldiers surrounded it, and one drunken soldier started a fire that soon engulfed the whole building. Ornate gold detail work in the roof melted down in the cracks between the stone walls of the temple, and to retrieve the gold, the Roman commander ordered that the temple be dismantled stone by stone. The destruction was so complete that today they have true difficulty learning exactly where the foundation of the temple was. Observe how little God values splendid houses of prayer when they are made dens of thieves. Christ foretells the utter ruin and destruction coming upon the temple. A believing foresight of the defacing of all worldly glory will help to keep us from admiring it. If we look at the world and all the things that are of the world as temporary, and they'll all be destroyed eventually, then it will help us to keep from envying and admiring, just keeping the perspective of eternity and overvaluing it. The most beautiful body soon will be food for worms, and the most magnificent building a ruinous heap. See ye not all these things? It will do us good so to see them as to see through them, and see to the end of them. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. Now they're asking him right here about what shall be the sign of thy coming. Now they're talking about his second coming, whenever he comes back and rescues the Jews. So you must keep in mind that the main focus of what Jesus is about to explain to them has to do with the second coming. Now we'll come to that, and not so much the rapture. But let's just observe this. Now we're going to get through this fairly quickly. And Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. The very first warning, take heed that no man deceive you. And how many are deceived today? Today, there are some 4,300 religions of the world. Now that's a lot of deception on out there. And it's so like Satan to, instead of just claiming that Christianity is false, because that's not going to work, God reveals the truth to people. So he just throws a whole lot more religions at people. Well, worship this elephant god, in Hindu, and worship Allah on over there. Here, I sent Muhammad and all this. So, he's just mingling all these together. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Now, this is one of the verses why a lot of preterists believe that he is talking about the destruction of 70 A.D. Well, we'll come to that. I don't take that view whatsoever. I do believe that he is also warning the group right there. So in the immediate context, he may have been telling them, look, destruction is going to come upon you, but we'll prove that this is a future that he's talking about for later readers of what he's saying. But before we go on, notice he says, for many shall come in my name saying, I am Christ. Right here's actually a guy who claims to be Jesus right now in the world today. But there are many, many more than him. Right here's just a short list of people who have claimed to be Jesus since that time. And the numbers, of course, with the population, it has escalated and escalated. So if you take the preterist view and say, well, he was talking, there were very, very few people whom claimed to be Jesus before 70 A.D. And by the way, Revelation was written around 90 A.D., 20 years later. So, of course, it's referencing the future that we're in right now. And there have been so many more false Christs since then. Now, just since the 18th century, well, right here's 2 documented, but 19th century. Now, these are just the ones that are known, that have claimed to be Christ. And there's over 40 in this partial list. You think there were about 40 before the time of Christ? 40 men claiming to be, well, we have no record of them. Now we have plenty of them. Just to clarify, this verse is one of the many proofs of how these events are not restricted to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. There have been many more who have claimed to be Christ since 70 A.D. than during that time. And we can just go on and see how this increase in wars and rumors of wars have just erupted all over the West. So just in the last 100 years, we now have nuclear bombs, and millions upon millions upon millions have died just during World War II. The Jews especially targeted by Hitler and the Nazis. So, this is definitely Jesus warning future readers as well as the group at his time. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure until the end, the same shall be saved. Jesus makes mention of false Christ right here, and false prophets. These beginning of sorrows have an accumulation ending with the 2 ultimate Antichrist and false prophet of Revelation 13. So there will be an ending to them, but the ending was not in 70 A.D. If anything, false Christ and false prophets have only increased since 70 A.D. So you can't take the preterist view. And right here is the ultimate proof that this isn't restricted to 70 AD. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Now he says unto all the world, unto all the nations, for a witness, as proof the gospel would go throughout the whole world. Well, you couldn't say that at 70 AD. Now it had expanded quite a bit because of Paul's ministry, but it wasn't throughout the whole, even of the known world. It wasn't throughout there. There were still barbarians everywhere. I mean, that no one took serious. But now we'll come to this. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. See, because now we have proof that the gospel has went throughout the whole world. Right here's ranker.com. This is not a Christian organization right here. Ranker.com. The number one most influential person ever in the history of the world is now, in our day, Jesus Christ. The gospel is the most famous message. The Bible is the most famous book. And there wasn't even a completed Bible until 90 AD. So you can't take the preterist view on this. I have to keep reiterating that for people. It doesn't fit with what Jesus is telling them. But right now, the number one most influential person ever is Jesus Christ. But also notice what Jesus says, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation. Now right here is more specifically pointing, of course, towards the Jews. So he says, whenever you see the abomination of desolation, because it'll happen in Jerusalem in the third temple, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Now notice right here how he's mentioning how the abomination of desolation is to come after him. So of course this couldn't have been fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes hundreds of years, or 150 or so years before Christ. That couldn't have happened because he's warning them about the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. And many believe that it will be the Antichrist, this man in whom will rise above the New World Order. And he'll step into the Holy of Holies and proclaim himself to be God. This point is midway through the 7-year tribulation, so it's at mid-trib tribulation. If you see Daniel 9, it's pretty clear. When the Antichrist will cause an abomination within the temple, which will pollute it and bring about the wrath of the Almighty. Now, this is right whenever it's guaranteed the rapture will happen, at least at midway point. Some people take the pre-trib view, that's fine. But we're not going to live past this because God's wrath comes down and we're not appointed unto wrath. Jesus here speaks of vengeance, which is only of the Lord. Deuteronomy 32:35. He also speaks of wrath, which we are not appointed to. See 1 Thessalonians 5:9. Now notice right here, for all you preterists who still aren't convinced, for then shall be great tribulation, which I believe is the time of God's wrath. We'll come to that right here. Such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. He says it will be the worst time ever in the history of mankind. Now, was that in 70 AD? And he even goes further and says, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Okay, now once again, I'm thinking more that he's talking about the Great Tribulation being God's wrath, because it says that there'll be a time as never has been. Now, definitely that wasn't 70 AD. We're looking at the time of God's wrath is so terrifying. I made a video specifically called God's Wrath, so you can just go and I lay out in Revelation what he does to the earth after we're raptured, and it is just beyond imagination. And he says, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Now, how in the world can you get that the days were shortened in 70 AD? To which we're about to come to the verses in Luke where he mentions vengeance and wrath. We're coming right up on them, and it happens right after the abomination of desolation. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And now right here in this verse, you can tell how in the immediate context he is speaking of 70 AD. He's speaking to both the group in front of him and for future readers and the entire thing. That's why it's written in the Bible for us to read 2,000 years later, because it also applies to us. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, speaking to the group in front of him, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now he's talking about the 2,000-year period of the times of the Gentiles, or at least that we're still in right now. But Israel lost its sovereignty as a nation back in 70 AD. Then the times of the Gentiles began, which is 2,000 years, and we see Israel becoming a nation again in 1948. It's already happened. It happened right after World War II. And now, after, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled, and now after, and there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. So right here we're seeing him talking about 70 AD, and now he's talking about the present. So you see the two are mixed within this, okay? Because we're never told in 70 AD about how there were signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity. We're never told about signs in the sun, and ancient historians would have written this, but we're never told about these. When are we told about them? In Revelation, which was 20 years after 70 AD, that was written how there would be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. Read Revelation 6. It's very clear on the sixth seal. But many would say, no, he's warning them about 70 AD. That is true. But notice what has happened since 70 AD. Do you not think that he wouldn't warn the Jews after 70 AD? Far more has happened to them. Over 1.1 million Jews perished during the War of 70 AD. Over a million. However, over 6 million Jews perished in WW2 alone, and many, once that Islam began to rise, perished. Millions of them perished. In fact, so many Jews died at the hands of Nazi Germany. Now pay attention. In fact, so many Jews died at the hands of Nazi Germany in the 1940s, that the world was moved to give them back their land of Israel, which had been taken from them during the War of 70 AD. It was 70 AD, the War of 70 AD, where they lost their sovereignty. And then it was WW2 where they got their sovereignty back, but many more had to perish. Jesus is speaking of both times within this end of the world context. He's warning the ones in front of him, and he's warning those in whom would come later. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Now, mind you, once again, none of these things happened in 70 AD. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. So he's talking about 70 AD, but now he goes way, way ahead. Thousands of years later, shall the sun be darkened, which we're told about in Revelation, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. Jesus makes a distinction between tribulation, John 16:33, you can look that up, and the great tribulation of verse 21 of this chapter. If one takes this into account, how Jesus makes specific mention of tribulation, then specific of great tribulation, you have to really be emphatic on the words. If one takes this into account, then an interval must be had in between immediately after the tribulation of those days, and shall the sun be darkened. So there has to be something happen after the tribulation, and not during, and not taking part in the great tribulation. And I believe that's the rapture. You can go watch my video on post-trib, pre-wrath refuted. You can go and watch my video on that for a lot more details, or at least a little more. But let's just examine in Revelation 6 where it's talking about this. Now, once again, I can't stress this enough. For anyone in whom takes the preterist view and they say that this is all pertaining to those of 70 AD, it is impossible. Jesus is talking about things that would be written in Revelation, which was a book written 20 years at the least after 70 AD had already occurred. So 70 AD, the War of 70 AD occurs, and then John, he pens Revelation. So it's impossible. And I beheld, it says in Revelation 6 about the seven seals. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. Obviously, it's the same thing that Jesus was telling this group in front of him about that would happen thousands of years later. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens of the rocks and in the mountains of the... But now, did that happen in 70 AD? What happened in 70 AD? Everyone went about their own way except the Jews and the Romans, and it was the Jews that perished. But right here it's talking about, and the kings of the earth, of all the world, and the great men and the rich men and the chief captains, everybody is hiding in the rocks. Now, what are they saying when they're hiding in the rocks? And said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Did that happen in 70 AD? No way. It is going to happen here in just a few days. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? That has not happened. And it'll all begin at the rapture. So it'll be from the time of the rapture unto the second coming that great wrath will be raining down upon the earth. Meteors and earthquakes and horrible earthquakes. Matter of fact, one earthquake hits that destroys all the cities of the world. That's how bad that this earthquake is. So there will be signs in the heavens, the sun and moon going dark, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Are you still taking the preterist view on this? And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. A lot of people I believe, get this wrong and say that this is the rapture. I used to take that view. This is clearly the second coming. He'll come down here. We come with him, with his saints. And notice it says that he'll be coming in the clouds. It's not that he's going back up into the clouds, but the rapture is a snatching up period. It's a very quick event. He doesn't come down to the earth. No, matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. He takes us from the earth at that time, because God's wrath is about to be poured down upon the world. It's going to be horrifying. But at this time, he's coming down with angels and gathering together his elect from the four winds, meaning from everywhere around the world. And he gathers them together so that they'll meet him. Now, that's only for the elect. The heathen, there'll still be a few heathen too left. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branches is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is near. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Now, this is where a lot of people in the preterist view, they say, well, look, he's talking to this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. It's obvious that these things haven't been fulfilled in 70 AD. So how do we get that he's talking to the future generation right here? Well, it's obvious. It says, so likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Okay, so all these signs and these wonders, these false Christs, everyone rising up, and the abomination of desolation happens. Once that all these things occur, and then the sun and moon go dark, and all these, he says, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass. So it's the ones in whom see all these things. And before we move on, in proper context, you have to put it like this. He's saying, whenever you see all these things, he's mainly not only just pointing to the future Christians or the future Jews, but he's pointing to specifically the Jews that live through the time of God's wrath, those in whom will be saved at the time of God's wrath. So this is an encouraging word for them. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. But of that day and hour knoweth no man. No, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Now, what does he mean by one shall be in the field, the other taken? Two women will be grinding corn, and one will be taken. Well, there's two alternatives to look at on this. The form of the expression is somewhat obscure and leaves it uncertain which of the two alternatives is the portion of the chosen ones. Is the man who is taken received into fellowship with Christ, while the other is abandoned? On the whole, the use of the Greek word in other passages, in Matthew 1:24 and such, is in favor of the former, okay, that the one taken is taken into fellowship with Christ. What is taught in any case is that the day of judgment will be as by an inevitable law, a day of separation, according to the diversity of character which may exist in the midst of the closest fellowship in outward life. No matter how close that you love someone, once that snatching away happens, that rapture that we talk about, once that happens, it doesn't matter if your buddy, your best of friends, even your brother or sister or mother or father, if they're not with Christ, they're left. But Jesus goes on and he says that of that day and hour knoweth no man. And I believe it's in Luke where he says not even the Son knows, only the Father knows. Well, Pulpit had good comment on that. A lot of people have struggled with that. The eternal Son as God by his omniscience, and as a man by knowledge imparted to him. Pay careful attention to what has happened in Christ's life, because it says that he grew in wisdom. It makes specific mention, while he was a man, he had to grow in wisdom just as other men do. And it was only what the Father would impart to him as far as wisdom goes that he was allowed to have while on the earth. By knowledge imparted to him, knows perfectly the day and the hour of the future judgment. But Christ, as man and as the messenger from God to men, did not so know it as to be able to reveal it to men. Jesus says, I keep nothing from you. I tell you all things. But at that time, it was not a necessary thing for Christ to know the day and the hour, or else he would have probably have told them the exact day and the exact hour. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink wine with the drunken. Notice what he says before we go on, and you see what happens to this servant. But notice what this evil servant says in his heart. He says, well, Jesus isn't going to come back. And he then begins to do evil, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants. So this is a man in whom actually becomes evil. This isn't just a backsliding Christian or something. This is a man who actually turns and starts persecuting the church, and shall smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink wine with the drunken, meaning that he goes out and parties with the world again. He starts to mingle with the world, and he just doesn't want to be a Christian anymore. The Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Take ye heed, watch and pray, for ye know not when the time is. For the Son of Man is as a man taking a far journey, who left his house and gave authority to his servants, and every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch. And right here's a very important part. Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh, and at evening, or at midnight, or at the cock crowing, or in the morning, lest coming suddenly he find you sleeping. And what I say unto you, I say unto all, watch. Now that's from an eyewitness account right there. That's Peter's account given unto Mark. But he says, what I say unto you, all these things that I've said, I say unto all, watch. Now that's very peculiar. He doesn't really say that any other time. So why, in telling them of the end of the world, and notice this whole thing begins with the disciples asking him about the end of the world. 70 AD, once again, was not the end of the world. It was the end of Israel for a time, but even they have become a nation again since. He's talking specifically unto all, watch. All throughout the time of the Gentiles, which Christ even makes mention of, all throughout the time of the Gentiles, all throughout the time of the second coming, and the 7-year tribulation period. This is very plainly for us today as well. But that is it for today's study, my dear friends. Here in a few days, we'll probably be coming upon the crucifixion. And I believe next week's going to be just a huge, huge week once again. I thank you all for joining me, though, tonight. I hope that you all learned something, and I hope that I have this right for y'all's sake. Thank you all once again. God of peace be with you. Amen.